I always thought if I kept my head down and the math clean, I could outrun where I came from. That morning in the South Loop, the wind off Lake Michigan slapped me through my coat anyway, and the office felt colder than outside. Glass, chrome, and a conference table long enough to seat an apology nobody here would ever offer. I'd been up late checking load calculations on a temporary overpass. Something didn't add up in the vendor's sheet. One little column that would buckle under a holiday weekend of semis. I printed the correction, hugged it to my chest like it could keep me warm, and told myself to be invisible. But then again, invisibility wasn't working for me anymore. They said a potential investor was visiting, so everyone practiced their best smiles. Tessa Crowley, the project manager, didn't have to practice. Her smile was permanent marker, bold, and it bled. The room smelled like burnt coffee and toner, and the HVAC clicked like a metronome nobody kept time to. "We're not rewriting the agenda, Maya," she said without looking at me. "We're showcasing confidence, not edits." I swallowed it, and the thing I'd learned to swallow since I was 16, and the court clerk stamped a file I can't talk about. I placed my revised sheet on the table anyway, slid it toward her, with the corners aligned. "It's not an edit," I said, steady. "It's the difference between safe and not." They laughed, the way people laugh, when they don't know math. Thin, high, seeking eye contact to make sure cruelty lands as a team sport. A junior associate, he wears a watch worth my rent, asked if I was nervous working with big numbers. I told him big numbers start as small ones, and we all answer to gravity. Tessa tapped her nails on the table, looked past me to the glass wall. "You're from the South Side, right?" she said, like it was a diagnosis. "You'll learn how we do things downtown." I kept my voice even. Downtown's where the trucks drive, too. She stared at me a beat too long. That's when the door opened. He walked in like someone who never races a clock, because clocks move for him. Tall, charcoal overcoat. No visible security, but the kind of quiet that is security. He stood at the back, eyes on the plans, not on me, and the room tightened, a little ripple passing through people who suddenly fixed their posture. This was the investor, I guessed. Or maybe just gravity with a face. Tessa clicked to the slide with the vendor numbers I knew were wrong. I felt that old squeeze in my lungs. The one that says, "Don't pick the fight. You'll lose the room." I picked it anyway. "Those live. Load allowances aren't right," I said, louder than I meant to. The HVAC hummed. Someone coughed into a cuff. "Show me," came his voice from the back. No microphone. Still carried. I walked to the screen, my hand not shaking because I had checked this 3 times. Cross. Referenced with DOT tables. And called an old union foreman who still takes my calls because I sent his nephew a spreadsheet that got him a raise. I traced the error, the compounding mistake, the holiday traffic estimate. He watched the numbers, not my face. The only way I knew he was listening was that the room stopped. Tessa smiled the way people smile when they're prepping the knife. "Maya is passionate," she said, "but sometimes passion confuses scope." She reached for something on the table and lifted my ID badge where it sat by my notebook. Blue lanyard, coiled like a little river. She let it fall. It hit the floor with a soft slap that felt loud as a verdict. My cheeks didn't heat. I was past heat. "Passion doesn't change deliverables," she said. "Let's not be distracted by side notes from someone who—" She glanced at the inbound paperwork on her tablet, and I saw it in her eyes. She'd pulled my background check. From someone who should be grateful to be in the room at all. I've been called worse. I've been told to get the mop when I wasn't the one who spilled anything. I've had a cop ask why my address didn't match my ID when my mom had to move us 2 blocks west into the same fear. I looked at my badge on the floor and thought of my little brother at 18, shaking in a courtroom while I said the stupid, brave thing that changed the direction of both our lives. I told myself, you breathe. Because if you breathe, you don't cry. And if you don't cry, they don't write you off as emotional. "I'm not a distraction," I said, and my voice came out plain as a ball cap at a job site. "I'm the reason that steel won't crack." The man at the back stepped forward, Nobody introduced him. He didn't bother. He stooped, picked up my badge, dusted a corner with his thumb like it was a habit, like he'd picked things up from floors before, some of them heavier than plastic. He didn't hand it to me. He clipped it back onto my lanyard, set it on the table in front of me, and looked at the slide again. "She's right," he said, casual, like we were deciding between two diners on a Sunday. "Fix the allowances, then run her numbers, not the vendors." Tessa blinked like a camera flash had gone off in her face. "And who?" she started. He cut her off gently, almost kind. "Cormac Hale," he said. The name sat in the room like a loaded truck idling. I knew it from the papers, ports, warehouses. A man who used to move things you don't say out loud, and then, one day, didn't. "From this minute," he added. "She audits anything with a bolt or a beam. If you need a chain of command, it goes through me. Through." He didn't say you report to me now. He didn't need to. That's how power sounds when it's not trying. Tessa tried to laugh, found no echo. "We have processes," she said, grasping for the life raft of policy. He nodded once. "Now you have better ones." People like to tell you that those moments change everything all at once. They don't. You still have to stand there with your pulse in your ears and pretend your life isn't pivoting on a stranger's choice. I gathered my papers, felt my hands steady, felt every hour I'd spent alone with specs and decimals finally answer back. "You're not crazy." The junior associate with the expensive watch avoided my eyes. The receptionist, a girl with box braids and nails like tiny flags, gave me a look that said, silently, "About time." On his way out, Cormac paused by the door. "South Side knows steel," he said, as if it were a weather report. "We'll need that." He didn't wait for a thank you. He stepped into the corridor, and all you could hear for a second was the building breathing. After, in the break room that always smells like microwaved fish someone denies, I ran cold water over my wrists until the shake went away. An older custodian I'd chatted with on late nights, Mr. Alvarez, socks cap always low, set a paper cup on the counter. "Mija," he said softly, though he's not my dad, and I'm 28, and tired of cutesy names. "You stood up straight. That's what stays." I smiled because if I didn't, I'd fall apart. "I thought it'd be another day I swallowed it," I told him. But then everything shifted fast. He chuckled. "Wind changes downtown. Sometimes it blows your way." When I got back to my desk, Tessa wasn't there. HR had sent an email full of phrases that mean nothing. My badge lay where Cormac put it, heavier than before. I picked it up, clipped it to my shirt, and it clicked like a seatbelt. What I didn't expect was the text buzzing my phone from an unknown Chicago number. "Stop checking your past." He's not looking for that. He's looking for what you build. I stared at it, at the reflection of myself in the black screen, at the city beyond the glass where a CTA train rattled by like a heartbeat. Maybe the rumor about Cormac was true. Maybe he was done moving contraband and had started moving people out of the corners they were shoved into. Or maybe I was just the convenient story he needed today. Either way, the math was mine. The bridge would hold. And if the room didn't want to see me, they'd have to look when the traffic rolled safe over something I refused to let collapse. I always thought keeping quiet would save me. What I didn't expect was that my voice would be the thing that did. I thought moving to Hale Wharf would feel like switching jerseys in the same ugly game. It didn't. It felt like stepping into a rhythm I already knew in my bones. Diesel purr, gulls heckling, steel thudding against steel. The kind of sound that tells you if something's off before a gauge ever does. The first morning I showed up in a borrowed pair of steel. Toes Maeve dug out of a closet. She measured my foot with a wooden spoon like an Irish aunt and stuffed a granola bar in my pocket when I tried to skip breakfast. "Eat," she said. "You can't math low blood sugar." She walked away, humming Springsteen like that was an OSHA rule. The dock guys clocked me fast. A woman with a clipboard. South Side vowels. You could hang a coat on. Twix badge clipped neat. They didn't say much, but silence has tone. A foreman named Big Leo tested me with the classics. "You sure you want to stand there, sweetheart?" And I just stepped around a slick, pointed at a frayed sling on a gantry, and said, "Only if you want a snapped line across your ribs by lunch." He squinted, then followed my finger and swore under his breath. We shut the crane down for 10 minutes and swapped the sling. 10 minutes cost money. A hospital visit costs lives. He didn't apologize. He handed me a donut from a greasy box and grunted. Glazed. Like a truce. I mapped the whole yard, the way you map a childhood you're trying to grow out of. Corners, shortcuts. Where trouble likes to sit. The reefer units were packed wrong, burning diesel to cool air that wasn't going anywhere. I rerouted them and shaved an hour off turn times on a Tuesday. 2 owner-operators pulled me aside by the chain. Link. 1, a woman with Patsy, stitched in red on her jacket, said, "If you can keep my chassis off the East Q, I'll name my next rig after you." I told her we weren't trading favors. We were killing dead time. Tiny Washington, 6, 5, ex-Army, hands like Christmas hams, laughed and said, "That's the favor, kid." Cormac was mostly a shadow that week. He had an office that looked at the water like it owed him back rent, a single-framed Cubs ticket on the wall just to make Southsiders twitch, and a safe he never locked when people were in there, which had to be on purpose. I dropped a stack of demurrage reports on his desk. "Your vendors billing us for Saturdays, like we're the Vatican." And the safe door fell open an inch. Inside was a photo, half tucked under an envelope. A younger Cormac in a ripped white shirt. A smear of dried blood on the cuff. The kind of smile you put on when you won a fight you didn't want. I didn't stare. I catalogued, the way I do. He watched me, not look, which told me he knows what people look for when they snoop. We spoke like 2 people fencing without touching blades. He'd ask, "How much can you save me if we kill Idol on Pier 3? And I'd say, "More than you think if you get out of my way." He didn't flinch at pushback. He nodded like someone who appreciates a clean punch to the jaw. When I told him the vendor's route tree made no sense, reefers bouncing between piers like a pinball, he gave me the authority to redraw assignments. "Write the SOP," he said. "Then make them do it." Most bosses love policy as theater. He wanted teeth. I wrote a 3-page doc, plain English, and stuck it in a lanyard sleeve on every forklift we owned. The second day, a driver named Manny held it up and asked, "You writing scripture now?" I told him, "More like 10 suggestions, but if you follow them, you'll be home for dinner." The numbers started moving. Per diem fees dipped. Turn times shaved by 6 minutes, then 12 on export lanes. Big Leo pretended not to notice until the union steward stopped me by the gate on a freezing Wednesday, at that lake wind that slices through denim like it's tissue, and said, "Whoever you are, you just saved us a shift this month." I said I was nobody, and he said, "That's the best kind." On lunch breaks, I ate Italian beef with extra giardiniera and mapped equipment flows on the back of napkins. Tiny brought me a coffee, like God intended, black, no nonsense, and told me a story about a cousin who ran numbers for a guy who ran with Cormac back in the day. "He ain't the devil," Tiny said, "but he used to dance in the same room." I asked why he was telling me. He said, "'Cause you got that look my sergeant used to get right before he took a hill, like you forgot to be scared." At night, the wharf went quiet in a way that felt honest. Cities lie to you with lights. Water just breathes. Maeve would pack up an extra container of stew for the girl with the clipboard. Pretend she didn't see me stash it in my backpack for my brother when he come off shift at the warehouse on 47th. I kept thinking about the unknown text from the office. "Stop checking your past." Like it was a chorus stuck in my head. I told myself it was none of my business who sent it. I told myself a lot of things that week. There was one moment I didn't plan, and maybe that's why it mattered. A reefer alarm wailed, one of those nasty, high, pitched ones that makes you clench your jaw. and a forklift clipped a stack of dunnage near the edge. 2 guys started yelling blame in different languages. Anger is bilingual. I stepped between them, probably stupid, definitely on instinct, and hit the alarm reset with my palm. "Breathe," I said, like I was talking to myself. "Go grab the spare hoses. You check the seals, not the locks." They kept yelling for 2 seconds longer than necessary, like they needed to save face by letting the steam run out. Then they did what I asked. The unit stopped screaming. You could hear gulls again. Manny muttered, "Jeffa," under his breath as he passed me. Boss lady. I pretended I didn't hear it and felt a stupid, quiet pride I didn't know what to do with. That afternoon, HR from my old firm called to clarify exit paperwork, and I let it ring out. They didn't want clarity. They wanted compliance. Then Tessa texted a single line, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I typed and deleted 3 answers, settled on none. Instead, I sent Cormac a photo of a clogged lane and a 1-line message. "Kill vendor split on B3. They're gaming us." He replied, "Do it. No emoji, no corporate applause." Authority is a strange feeling when you've lived your life asking permission you never should have had to ask. Later, in his office, I laid down the week's metrics, savings, projections, the little wins that stack into something real. He listened with his chin in his hand, that Cubs ticket over his shoulder like a dare, to my socks hoodie. "You don't sleep much," he said. I told him sleep was for people whose names weren't on sealed files. He looked at me the way you look at a radio, when you finally lock onto a station through the static. "I don't offer charity," he said. "I don't take it," I said back. "Good," he said. Then, almost as an afterthought, "I don't like owing favors." I met his eyes. "Then don't make me one. Put me where the numbers hurt the liars most." He smiled. Not big. Just enough to show a man who liked a clean edge. "Pier 2, export side, he said. "They keep losing minutes like socks in a dryer." I took the assignment and turned to go. The safe door whispered open again with that careless inch, and I caught the edge of the photo in the dim. Blood on cuff. Younger. Unbroken. Or maybe just not yet paying the bill. I didn't ask. He didn't offer. We both knew what questions do to people who are trying to be new. On my way out, Tiny called, "Alvarez!" from the cab of his Peterbilt, and tossed me a pack of hand warmers like a rite of passage. "You're doing fine," he said. "Don't let these lake boys make you think otherwise." I laughed, tucked the warmers into my gloves, and thought about how quiet victory sounds when it's just a better line at a gate. Not fireworks, not speeches, a reefer humming at the right decibel, and a foreman who stops calling you sweetheart because you kept him off a gurney. I'd come here planning to prove a point. Instead, the doc was teaching me a different kind of math. You add up the small, and the big starts to move. Somewhere north of us, the city glared and glittered and chewed people like stale gum. Down here, steel met water, and we made space for trucks to roll and people to get paid. Maybe that's not a grand redemption arc. Maybe it's just a shift done right. But I felt the click of something inside me, like my badge had that first day, settling into place. A kind of quiet I could finally hear myself think inside of. I didn't know yet who sent the text, or why Cormac's cuff once wore blood, or what it would cost to keep this rhythm going. I just knew one thing. I belonged to the work, and the work was finally starting to belong to me. City Hall smells like old varnish and hot nerves. The aldermen sit up there under gold trim, like the room borrowed its dignity from a better decade, and a digital clock eats seconds off everyone's life 3 minutes at a time. I signed my speaker card and kept my hands flat on the binder I'd built from midnight coffee and city procurement logs I FOIA'd, because sometimes you don't need a hero. You need a paper trail. The room was packed, the way Chicago shows up when it smells a fight. Union jackets, church ladies and Cubs windbreakers, a blogger live, tweeting from the aisle. Stone and Hart had a whole row of suits and a PR woman who could smile and bite at the same time. Tessa sat near them, legs crossed, phone face down like restraint, which was cute. I could feel that old tightness, the one that tells you to stay small, keep the peace, let the machine roll over you, and pretend it's a massage. I kept my shoulders level and thought about load limits and gravity and the way truth holds if you don't panic. They called my name after a guy complaining about sidewalk cafe permits and before a woman begging for a speed bump. I walked to the mic with my binder and no speech, just numbers, because numbers are the only thing that ever said my name right. I started the way my old foreman taught me, common sense, and then proof. Madam Chair, members, I said, steady. The live bound load estimates in the vendor's packet are padded, not to protect public safety. Those lines on page 12 are ghost charges, labeled Safety Assurance. If you flip to tab 3, you'll see the same items billed twice, once under hardware, once under a new code that didn't exist last quarter. I could hear my own voice in the speakers. Too big and too close. So I dialed it down to that calm you use with toddlers and explosions. I pulled the change logs. The object code was added 6 days after Stone and Hart lost a private insurer. They started using the city as the backstop. An alderman in a slick navy suit leaned into his mic like a hawk spotting a mouse. Ms. Alvarez, are you alleging fraud? I didn't flinch. I'm showing you math. You can name it whatever fits your ethics this week. And that's when Tessa stood, without waiting for recognition, classic, and slid into the aisle like she owned oxygen. With respect, she said, which in corporate means none is coming. This is a disgruntled former staffer from a neighborhood with challenges. She has a history of poor judgment. She held up a sheet with my name on it the way people hold up a trophy. I recognized the outline. My sealed file wasn't on that page, but the ghost of it was there, in the way her voice curled around the word sealed. Maybe Ms. Alvarez should explain why the court keeps part of her story locked away. I could feel the room shift, the little animal inside everyone's chest that perks up at the scent of scandal. My hands stayed where I put them. I don't owe you my pain to validate my math, I said to the mic. Not to her. You don't get to turn my zip code into a rounding error. If you think I'm wrong, show your work. Right now, all I see is the city paying for the same bolt twice because your vendor renamed it. Behind me, I heard the smallest sound, the hush of a single satisfied breath, and I knew without turning that he was here. Cormac didn't take the mic. He didn't need it. He stood near the back with his coat over his arm, like he might leave if this bored him. And the room made space with that weird ripple of crowd physics that follows money and certainty. The chair tried to steer back to process, asked the comptroller to explain the object code. And the comptroller did that thing where a man talks for 90 seconds to say, I have no idea. Then Cormac stepped forward, just enough to be undeniable, and addressed the dais without asking permission, which is a kind of permission in this town. Hale Wharf is a staging partner for the overpass materials, he said. Voice low, casual, South Side vowels borrowed on purpose. Performance on this job touches my yards every day. We're not the city. We are, however, the private side escrow on the logistics tranche, and we carry the performance bond through an affiliate. Clause 14. 7 of your own contract states that if there's a credible claim of duplicate safety billing, the bondholder can demand a third-party audit and freeze milestone draws pending that audit. He lifted a single sheet of paper, the kind you only lift if you already know it wins. As of this morning, we're invoking it. Silence is noisy when it's angry. The PR woman blinked too slow. Processing. Tessa tried to smile like she had a plan B and realized in real time she didn't. An alderman with a ward full of donors from Stone and Hart snapped. You don't get to dictate to this body. Cormac's face didn't change. I'm not dictating to the city, he said. I'm enforcing your contract terms on the private side. You can keep meeting. The money is paused. He nodded toward my binder, not at me, to the work, which is the only respect I actually wanted. Until the audit finishes, you use her numbers. He didn't say her name like a white knight. He said it like a project manager, reading aloud from a plan. The chair rubbed her forehead, like a woman who's seen worse and would like a vacation. Ms. Alvarez, she said, leave your binder with the clerk. Mr. Hale, File your notice with the law department before you leave this building. Stone and Hart, sit tight." Tessa turned to me in that second the mics weren't on and hissed, "You don't know how this city works." I kept my eyes on the dais and answered like I was reading something only I could see. "I know how steel works," I said. "It doesn't care about your PR." Public comment moved on like it always does. A city can pivot from your life to a pothole without blinking. I sat back down, palms buzzing, and realized my leg was shaking under the table. Patsy slid into the seat behind me and squeezed my shoulder. Quick, workmanlike. Tiny stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, a wall that could move if needed. Across the aisle, a church lady in a Cubs jacket gave me a smile that had Sunday school and hard winters in it. I wanted to cry, and didn't. The blogger sent me a DM asking for my sources. I typed back, FOIA, like everyone else, and attached the change logs, because sunlight isn't a threat if your numbers are honest. After they adjourned, gavel, shuffle, people pretending they weren't staring, I stepped into the corridor where the air is always 10 degrees hotter than justice. Tessa tried to flank me by the elevators, phone back in her hand, her voice low and mean. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, she said. "When they audit you, let's see how clean your story is." I wanted to tell her I learned to live with not clean a long time ago, that I scrubbed other people's mistakes out of my life like grease from a sleeve and some stains don't come out. You just learn to wear them and still show up. I didn't give her that speech. I gave her one sentence. "Pick up yourself. Respect at HR," I said. And for a beat, she looked genuinely confused, like she hadn't heard herself say 100 things worse to people who couldn't answer. The elevator pinged and swallowed her fake perfume. When I turned, Cormac was leaning against a marble column like he'd been born there. "You did fine," he said, like we were at a Little League game, and I'd finally kept my eye on the ball. I told him I wasn't fine. I was vibrating. He nodded like he remembered that feeling and didn't miss it. "You'll sleep," he said. "Maybe not tonight." He held out an envelope, heavy stock, city stamp on the corner. "Law department acknowledgement," he said. "So you don't have to trust my word for it." I took it because you always take receipts when the room is this expensive. "What's it cost you to pull that lever?" I asked. Not as a fan, as a woman who knows debt when she smells it. He looked past me, down the corridor, at the wall of old mayors. "Less than it costs to look away," he said. He pushed off the column. "We'll need your SOPs for the audit team by Friday." It wasn't a question. It was a promise, disguised as work. He started to go, and then paused. "And Alvarez?" He waited until I met his eyes. "Next time someone waves your past around like a party favor, ask them to show you where in the bid specs juvenile court is a deliverable." I laughed then, an ugly, loud burst in a quiet hall, and the security guard at the metal detector grinned at me like we were on the same team. Outside, the wind off the lake hit hard enough to sting. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. "You held the line. Keep your head." He plays long. I wanted to know who he was in that sentence. Cormac, or the city, or the century I was born into. I put the envelope under my coat and headed down the steps into traffic noise and bus breaks and the 1,000 tiny deals a city makes with itself every day. I used to think the big moments would feel like drums. Turns out they feel like a binder changing hands and a money spigot turning off with a quiet click. And a woman from the south side walking away without apologizing for knowing the difference between a bolt and a con. The week after City Hall felt like standing under a leaky roof while everyone argued about whether it was raining. My phone turned into a small courtroom. Radio hosts clipping my quotes into hot takes. A blog headline calling me Southside Whistleblower, like that was my first and last name. DMs that bounced between "You're a hero" and "Go back to school, sweetheart." And one blue check account hinting about my sealed incident, which is a neat way to say they didn't know, but wanted clicks. My brother sent me a screenshot of a Reddit thread where a guy swore he worked with me, and I made scenes for attention. I've never met him. People will write whole novels about you to avoid their own mirror. I kept my head down at the wharf and did the math. Diesel still burned, cargo still moved. and the lake wind still cut through Carhartt like it was gossip. Work doesn't care about your trending tab. Maeve caught me one night in the kitchen with my hands wrapped around a mug I wasn't drinking. She didn't do the anti-squeeze or the ignore them honey speech. She set out bread and butter and said, "Names are jackets. Some fit, some you outgrow. Don't wear one because the loudest person threw it at you." I told her they were trying to drag my past into a room it didn't belong in. She nodded, more tired than sad. "That past kept your brother's head above water," she said. "You don't owe them the story. You owe yourself the quiet." Then she slid a folded paper across the table, an old Polaroid of some union picnic from the 80s. "My Danny took this before he got laid off a fourth time. He wrote on the back, 'Work is how we love people we can't fix.'" I kept the photo in my pocket for a week. The first hard conversation with Cormac happened on the pier, in air that tasted like metal in winter. He didn't waste my time with, "How are you holding up?" He looked at the yard like it was a chessboard he finally wanted to play fair on and said, "You're getting hit from both ends. You okay to keep building?" I told him building was the only thing keeping me from crawling out of my skin. Then I said the part that had been chewing at me since the hearing. "I'm not your PR." It came out flat, not cruel, just true. If we do something, it can't be a halo project with your name in gold on a plaque. He didn't flinch, which was its own answer. He put both hands on the rail, knuckles white the way you grip a steering wheel in black ice, and said, "You're not a halo. You're an engine. And since honesty is the only currency you seem to take, I used to be a hand for people who move things we didn't list on bills of lading. I didn't open boxes. I didn't ask questions. That's cowardice, not cleanliness. I don't erase it. I just stay." He let the wind carry that last word. I believed him and hated that I did, because believing costs. "Then here are my lines," I said. "We start a paid apprenticeship for South Side kids who aren't getting through the door because no one will vouch for them. Not charity, paychecks. Forklift and rigging certs. OSHA 10. Rotations with union mentors. Childcare stipends. Bus cards. Boots. An independent board with people who don't owe you a favor. Outside CPA. No glossy press conference. We call it South Dock Apprenticeship. Not hail anything. I want veto power on vendors." He didn't counter. He asked, "What do you need first?" I said. "A classroom that doesn't smell like mildew. A training rig we don't cut corners on. And Manny off nights twice a week to teach pre-trip inspections because those kids will listen to him." He did a quick breath. "The kind you take right before you pull a splinter." "Done," he said. "All of it. Except one thing. I sit on the board, no chair, one vote, and you can outvote me." I stared at him. Men like him don't give up steering wheels. "Why?" He shrugged toward the yard. "If I don't put skin in it, my old friends will, and they won't ask your permission. We built it faster than the city builds anything." Maeve brokered the classroom from a church basement with decent heat and a stubborn pastor who told us, "I want 2 seats reserved for kids who got suspended and 1 for a single mom," then handed me a ring of keys and said, "Don't make me regret trusting you, Big Leo." Pretended he wasn't into the mentorship thing until he saw the rig I spec'd. Proper fall arrest. Real knots. No YouTube nonsense. And then he picked up a dry erase marker and started drawing load paths like an artist showing off. Manny showed up in a pressed shirt and said, "I don't have a teaching voice." Then opened with, "You screw up pre-trip. You kill somebody's uncle." And 10 heads snapped forward like he'd pulled a fire alarm. Tiny made shirts that said, "Paychecks. Pity," and handed them out like candy. I called city colleges and begged a counselor named Ms. Howard I hadn't spoken to since she wrote me a 2-sentence recommendation at 19, when my life was a smoke alarm. She remembered me. "You were the one with the popsicle, stick truss, that held 40 pounds, she said, laughing. "You looked mad it didn't hold 50. Send me your syllabus." I typed it that night on my kitchen floor because tables feel like meetings and I needed the ground. The internet noise didn't stop. If anything, It got weirder. Next door threads accusing us of importing crime if we trained kids from certain zips. A non-profit guy offering to advise for a fee that was a salary with a nicer shoe. I turned down TV hits. We took photos only of hands-on rigging, not faces. The first cohort filled in 3 days. 2 girls from Englewood, 4 boys from back of the yards, a vet who said he needed to sleep near daylight to keep his head right. We ran them through knots until their fingers were raw, and then Maeve fed them stew until they smiled without checking who was watching. On payday, a kid named Isaiah looked at his stub and said, too quietly, I didn't think I'd ever see my name next to this number and not be scared someone was going to take it. I went to the bathroom and cried like a pipe finally found the right joint. Then the other shoe tried to drop. Priya, our accountant, a woman who could look at a spreadsheet and smell a lie, came into my office with a manila envelope and a face that said she didn't sleep. This was messengered to my apartment, she said. No return address, just a cheap business card. K, Lake Freight, sponsorship, a cashier's check for $25,000, and a note that read, like a lawyer wrote it drunk. Consider this a retainer to align vendor guidelines. Priya said, they want to seed the fund, then yank it with a story. I felt my stomach do that thing it does before a punch lands. I called Cormac. He didn't say hello. He said, tell me. I read it out. He exhaled like a man looking at an old scar. We document, we return it, we file with the AG and IRS, and we do not spook them until we know where it started. I said, this smells like a front. He said, everything does, at the beginning. That night, I walked home down 18th Street in air that tasted like snow and carne asada. The L screaming like it always does, a sound you hate until it's how you know you're home. I kept thinking about jackets, names you wear because someone else zipped you into them, names you shrug off because the sleeves finally fit wrong. Southside whistleblower, juvenile something, Cormac's, pass girl. I didn't want any of those. I wanted builder. I wanted boss lady because the guys said it with respect and a joke in it. I wanted the kind of quiet Maeve had talked about, where the work is how you love people you can't fix. We were finding that quiet in a city that feeds on noise. And somewhere in that noise, somebody was already tuning their instrument to play dirty. Priya texted me a photo at midnight, a close-up of the cashier's check with a watermark I didn't recognize. You see this? She wrote. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. There was a tiny emblem in the corner, not a bank. A lake outline and a letter K with teeth in it. Yeah, I texted back. I see it. I didn't know whose hands were behind it yet. I just knew we'd built something worth attacking. And for once, instead of panic, what I felt was a steady kind of anger that made me careful. The first sign wasn't a headline. It was a bank hold that hit at 8:12 a.m., like a trap door. Priya called from the branch lobby, whispering like the carpet could hear her. They froze the apprenticeship account, she said. Compliance flagged an inbound from a K Lake Freight Charitable and 3 micro deposits that look like account verification. I didn't authorize any of it. My stomach did that bad roller coaster dip. Payroll for the cohort ran Friday. Did they say why? She blew out a breath. Suspicious activity report, possible pass, through. Maya, they think we're a funnel. I looked out across the yard where Manny was showing Isaiah how to check a tire bead with his thumb, like a mechanic's blessing. You don't tell a kid there might not be a check after he just learned a knot with his name on it. We'll cover payroll, I said, even though I had no idea how. I'll call Hale. Cormac didn't ask how we were feeling. He asked how long we could keep teaching if he fronted cash from an unrelated entity, and we documented it to the penny. He said, unrelated, like he'd spent his life learning what those words mean when the wrong eyes look. No heroes, he added, already texting someone. People gotta get paid. I hung up, and the power cut out. Not at my desk. The entire South Wharf went dark, like somebody pulled God's plug. The reefer alarms howled in different pitches, equipment lights dead, radios coughing to static. Stay off lifts, I yelled, heart racing the way it does when memory hands you an old fear. Big Leo swore in 2 languages. Tiny grabbed a handheld flood like we'd rehearsed this. Cormac's office emergency lights ticked on a heartbeat later, back up humming. He stepped into the yard, calm, he had no right to, and barked a grid. Generators. Manual resets on 3. No forks near the edge. He glanced at me. You with me? The question was about more than breakers. It came 10 minutes later, my phone buzzing against my thigh with a text from the same unknown number that had become a weird guardian angel. Don't trust your own tax returns. K. Lake filed an amended 990 in your name. Priya pinged me a PDF before I could answer. Her subject line? What? The fake 990 listed a donor circle we'd never seen and a K Lake Freight Charitable address that mapped to a P.O. box under an overpass near Calumet. They hadn't just tried to seed us. They'd tried to write our story in ink and hand it to the IRS. I tasted metal. Who the hell is K Lake? I asked the air. Tiny scratched the back of his neck. K for Karn, he said. And it hung there, obvious and ugly. Silas Karn's name is a rumor you don't say too loud. Logistics, old school. He buys people before he buys permits. He hates how Cormac went clean like it was an insult to the past. We found out where the power cut started. The old grain elevator at the edge of the yard. The one that looks like it still hears ghosts of wheat. Someone tripped breakers and walked away. Security footage glitched into static at the exact moment the main threw. That takes timing you don't get from YouTube. I'm going up, I said. Cormac shook his head once. I ignored it once. We met in the middle of the argument. You don't get to write me out of my own fight, I told him. He stared at me a second. Whatever he was weighing landed. 2 radios, he said. Harness on the catwalk. I'm behind you. If you run toward me. It wasn't sweet. It was logistics. Inside the elevator, it smelled like dust and iron and missed opportunities. Our boots echoed. We climbed into a pocket of cold, where the wind slid through cracks like a thief. I clicked my headlamp on and saw the panel door hanging open, lock clipped and placed neatly on the floor like a courtesy. Someone wanted us to know it wasn't vandalism, I said. Someone wanted you to know, Cormac said, which wasn't comforting. Halfway across the catwalk, my boots skated on a fresh grease smear and the floor dropped out, hand on railing or goodbye. A fist caught the back of my jacket and yanked, hard enough to bruise. Watch your step, Alvarez, a voice said, from the dark like a joke with a blade in it. He stepped into my headlamp, Rafe Vitale, the name I knew from stories the doc whispered when it got late. Cormac's old shadow, a man who used to solve problems with speed and bad ideas, then disappeared when the cleanup started. You working night shift for Silas now? Cormac asked, voice gone flat. Rafe's mouth did a cautious half smile. I work for whoever pays and doesn't bore me. Tonight, that's Karn. I told him the breaker trick was stupid. He likes stupid, if it makes him feel clever. His eyes flicked to me and softened a millimeter. He's setting you up, kid. Kay, Lake is his. He'll file 3 more donations through cutouts. CC a reporter, and let compliance do the rest. By the time you clear it, the program's dead and your name tastes like pennies. I should have been shaking. I was weirdly calm. Maybe fear burned off into something else when you stood too close to it. Why tell me? I asked. Rafe stared at the floor, grating like it was telling his future. Debt's a weird animal, he said. Some you pay with money. Some you pay by not letting a thing repeat. He looked at Cormac, and then back at me. You get 1 free tip. He's hiding the money routes in containers with real cargo, no drugs, just shell companies billing themselves. Watch chassis swaps and weekend runs out of the Lake Yard near 130th. Follow SCIC codes. He thinks you won't look because it's boring. He stepped back into shadow like a stage cue. Oh, and tell your accountant not to sign anything electronic for 72 hours. He's going to send a DocuSign that looks legit. It's not. I heard Cormac's breath change, that quiet inhale people do when they want to punch a wall and can't. Walk away, Rafe, he said. Rafe chuckled. Not mean. Not the line you used to use. He disappeared down a ladder with a metal rhythm that sounded like leaving. We reset the panel, and the yard lights bloomed back one by one, like a slow sunrise that cost too much. I wanted to sit down and let my knees have their say. Instead, I walked back to the office and started pulling threads. If Lake was laundering through boredom, I'd make boredom sing. I had EDI logs from our drayage app, RFID pings at the gate, chassis swap tickets, and a stack of paper Manny calls my nerd rocks. It was like doing a jigsaw with too many sky pieces. I filtered for weekend departures, matched SCAC codes to carriers whose insurance papers smelled like a Kinko's job, and followed a single box, MAEU 4761XXX. From a legitimate soy shipment to 3 transfers it didn't need. Each transfer added a freight optimization fee paid to a company with a name that sounded like a candle brand. Lake Kind Logistics, Kind Lake Resource, LK Resource Partners. I drew the chart and the K's lined up like teeth. Priya texted at 1:03 a.m. DocuSign came. Exactly what he said. Sender mask is clean. Hidden route goes to a .ru domain. I felt a rush of ugly triumph. Good, I typed. Decline, screenshot, forward to AG and bank, and IRS Tigta. She sent back a thumbs, up and a skull, because accountants have humor nobody appreciates, until it saves you. I emailed the board our plan. No panic. Bridge payroll from a clean line Cormac set. Full paper trail. Public memo when we had facts and not vibes. I added a line. If a city reporter calls, tell them we'll show our books on Tuesday at noon in the church basement, and they can bring a forensic accountant if they like. Sunlight is risky if you're dirty. It's boring if you're clean. At 2:11 a.m., the unknown number pinged once more. He'll hit the grain elevator again if you make him feel ignored. He likes noise. Don't give it to him. I typed, "Who are you?" and stared at the 3 dots that never came. I closed my laptop and leaned back, the office dark except for a lamplight that made everything look gentler than it was. The fear was still there, sitting in the corner like an old roommate I couldn't evict. But there was something else layered under it now. Anger with a steering wheel. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to let a fake charity define work I could touch with my hands. Karn had money and time and a taste for theater. I had Manny and Priya and Tiny and Maeve's Stu and a cohort of kids who learn knots with their names on them. And I had boring logistics, which, when it's yours, is a kind of power the loud people always underestimate. Rain in Chicago doesn't fall. It leans. That night, it leaned hard off the river, needling through my jacket as we pulled up to the warehouse that Karn liked because it looked like the city owed it money. Corrugated tin, a busted mural of a bull, a generator coughing like a smoker. Cormac killed the headlights 2 blocks out and rolled us close with that steady hands on the wheel thing guys do when they've spent years pretending fear is a choice. "We don't stay long," he said. "We say what needs saying. We leave vertical." I told him I was tired of letting other people narrate things I built. He didn't argue. He checked his inside pocket, not for show. The rain hammered harder, made the chain link shake like nerves. Rafe was already there with 2 of Karn's men, the kind of guys who wear work boots they've never scuffed. The generator threw a jaundiced glow across pallets and a forklift with a bad fork seal, and somewhere a radio played the end of a Bulls game with the volume low, like the night needed an alibi. Rafe looked smaller, out from under the myth. Coat dark with rain, jaw tight, eyes doing math the way a brawler does, angles, distance, where the exits live. "Hail," he said, nodding at Cormac with almost a smile, and his gaze snagged on me. "Kid." I let kid go by because picking that fight would lose the room we were about to need. Karn didn't show. Of course he didn't. He sent a speaker, middle manager, outlaw, slick hair, hands in pockets, like he had more than fingers to count. "We're here to straighten out paperwork," the guy said. "Your little classroom got some wires crossed. Our client wants to make it right." He held up a manila envelope like a magician about to pull out a dove. I could smell the lye like diesel on clothes. I stepped forward before Cormac could block me and handed the guy a clear folder with the kind of calm I've had to practice since I was 16 and learned the trick of breathing through other people's arrogance. "Here's the straight," I said. "Weekend chassis swaps. 3 shells, Lake Kind Lake, LK Resource. Billing each other for optimization that never occurred. Same SCAC bouncing between 2 plates. Same VIN logged on our camera twice an hour apart because your driver did a lap for show. There's also this." I tapped the old iPhone I was palming like a stress ball and hit play. Not a movie soundtrack, not a taped confession, just a voicemail dump from a number Priya traced to a prepaid. Karn's assistant saying, flat as office air, "If they push the audit, we cut the lights again, seed 2 more donations, and leak the amended 990. Doesn't matter if it sticks, the stink will." I looked at their faces while it played. One blinked, the other didn't. Rafe stared at the floor, like the words had mud on them. Cormac didn't draw or posture, which is maybe why the whole scene didn't spin into the tragedy it wanted to be. He spoke to Rafe, but looked past him to the men who came ready to be impressed by violence. "Tell Karn he's not just across the line," he said. "He's building a condo on the wrong side of it. You can try to burn me again, but you touch her students. You touch the checks. And I will make Boring your enemy. I will bury him in audits and escrow freezes and freight carriers that stop answering his calls." The slick one rolled his eyes like he was bored already. That told me we were landing hits where his boss couldn't feel them. Pride, not prison. "Cute theater," he said. "But this is still our side of town at night." He twitched 2 fingers. The doors at the far end peeled open, and more rain came in, with 3 guys who looked like they'd practiced being silhouettes. I felt my heart do the old drumline, but the fear tunneled into something else. Narrower, meaner, useful. I took another step, felt Cormac's breath hitch behind me, and raised a printout like a traffic stop. "Before you make this messy," I said, "know this file has a little gift inside. Open it, and the beacon pings 3 places at once. The AG fraud desk, IRS TIGTA, and a CPD task force email with your cell tower. If it doesn't see a cancel code in 15 minutes. I set the timer when you texted me, 'Come talk.' You're 5 minutes deep." The slick one laughed like he'd heard every bluff. Rafe didn't laugh. He knew a person who builds bridges for a living can rig a timed load. He turned his head, small, toward me. "You did that?" Not mocking, checking. I nodded. He spat rain and cursed, softly in Italian, the way my neighbor on 55th does when the Cubs strand 2. Then he did a thing I didn't expect. He stepped away from Karn's men like he was tired of standing in their shade. "Silas thinks pain is a hobby," he said to no one in particular. "He'll burn cash to watch somebody sweat." He looked at Cormac then. Something old in the look. Something like grief, dressed as sarcasm. "You sure you want to start something you have to finish?" Cormac's voice went quiet and dangerous, the way a road gets quiet at 3 a.m. "I already started when I stopped," he said. "I'm not going back to clean." For a second, everything slowed. Rain drilling the tin. The Bulls postgame bleeding into an ad for a used car lot. A generator threatening to die. The slick one flicked his wrist, and one of the silhouettes moved a half step like men do when they want to make themselves into momentum. And I did the stupid thing that felt right and stepped between people built for regretting it. "You ever worked a real job?" I asked him, point blank. And something in my tone, maybe the pure, exhausted contempt of a woman who had counted every bolt in a bridge no one would thank her for, made him stop long enough to look at me. "We pay kids Friday," I said. "You file another fake letter. You cut another line. You keep my cohort from groceries. And I will turn every boring thing you hide behind into a siren. I will make aunties talk. I will make the church basement a press room. And I will bring a forensic accountant who wears payless and eats men like you for breakfast because she likes rules more than she likes sugar." He wanted to say something mean. I watched the words die as the first faint blue flutter hit the far wall through the rain, lights bouncing off puddles in that specific way every Chicago kid knows. The beacon worked. Or maybe a neighbor called. Or maybe God took a union break and came back on the clock. Whatever it was, the CPD tint slid over the tin like a warning shot. The slick one cursed, pointed at Rafe like betrayal was a noun you could throw, and backed toward the bay door with his silhouettes dissolving into weather. Rafe didn't move. He stood like a man waiting for a judgment he'd already given himself. Cormac took one step toward him, and for a second, I saw the old Hale, the one people paid to solve problems with speed, and I hated how easy it would be for him to be that man tonight. He could end Rafe and call it balance. He didn't. He stopped within arm's reach and said the line I'd heard about but never seen used right. "Walk away, Rafe." He didn't say it like a prayer or a threat. He said it like a rule. Rafe's throat worked. He stared at me, then at Cormac, then at the blue smear getting brighter on the wet floor. "I got something that should have been burned," he said. He pulled a beat, up thumb drive from his coat, and, for one wild second, I thought he'd pitch it into a puddle just to watch me dive. He didn't. He held it out. Invoices? Shell maps? Burner numbers? The kind of boring you like. I took it because that's what you do when a man who hasn't given anything honest in a decade gives you something that could get him killed. "Why?" I asked. He looked away at the rain like it had an easier face than mine. "Because a long time ago, somebody paid my bond when nobody should have. And a woman with a voice like yours told a judge I might be worth the paperwork. Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. This is me paying it back with interest." He started toward the side door, then stopped, still not looking at me. "And Alvarez," he said, voice gone rough. "Your brother doesn't owe anybody anything anymore. Files clear. Not sealed. Cleared. Tell him to stop looking over his shoulder at red lights." I felt that in my knees. The kind of news your body takes first because your brain thinks it's a trick. "You did that?" He shook his head without turning. "I knew a clerk who owed me a favor, who owed another clerk, who owed the janitor. You can call it me, or you can call it the city finally doing one good thing out of habit." Then he was gone into the rain and the horn of a train that happened to pass at the right second, like a curtain coming down on a show nobody clapped for. The squad cars rolled slow like they were bored already. Cormac tucked his hands where the cops could see them and did not do the thing his old life had trained into his muscles. He stood next to me, not in front of me, and when the questions came, we answered like we had nothing to hide, because for once, we didn't. I slid the thumb drive into a Ziploc I carry for receipts and said the phrase that makes liars nervous: "Happy to provide documentation." Later, in the truck with the heater blasting fake desert onto our wet clothes. Cormac didn't talk for 2 blocks. Then he said, almost to himself, "I had him in my hands. I stared out at the river cutting black through the city. And you let him be somebody else," I said. "So did you," he said back. And I didn't know if he meant me or the woman I'd been when I was 16, or the city when it remembers how to be decent for 5 minutes at a time. My phone buzzed once more from the unknown number. "Good play. Don't gloat." "He hates silence. Starve him," I typed. "Tell me who you are, and watch the dots not appear again." We drove past the church where the classroom lights were still on. Maeve and Manny and Isaiah probably arguing about whether a double fisherman's is overkill for pallets, and I felt the ache of adrenaline crash behind my ribs. Fear was still there, sure, but it had company now, a thin, steady relief, and a tired pride I didn't know where to put. The rain kept leaning, the city kept breathing, and for the first time in a long time, I believed we could do more than survive other people's decisions. We could make some of our own. The fallout didn't land like fireworks. It landed like paperwork and Tuesday mornings. Priya's packet, Rafe's drive, and our boring little beacon. Those 3 things turned into subpoenas. And in a month, Karn wasn't swagger. He was an indictment with a press conference nobody clapped at. AG's office said all the lawyer words: pattern, pass, through, coercive, And then the city quietly blacklisted 3 shell vendors that sounded like candle brands. It wasn't a movie. It was signatures. And a judge who looked like she'd seen this plot since the Daily years and was finally tired. Tessa made her own statement in a lobby somewhere, blamed breakdowns and oversight, and offered the kind of apology that never uses the word sorry. It didn't matter. Procurement hung a 3-year ban on her firm, and the professional association slid an ethics reprimand onto her name that'll Google stain forever. Manny watched it on his phone at the yard, shook his head, and said, "She still thinks she's the hero of her own documentary." Tiny printed out the headline and pinned it to the corkboard with a note. Safety, 1. Grift, 0. We had a different press thing, if you want to call it that. No podium, no alderman doing the scissors dance. We took a Saturday morning with coffee and paper cups and a torque wrench, and we bolted a small sign to the new overpass gusset. Legal, approved, no drama. Just a line in clean letters. Built by hands that weren't invited, but stayed. A bus whooshed by, and some kid on the back seat pressed his face to the glass and flashed us a peace sign. Maeve cried without making a sound. Isaiah took a picture and texted it to his grandma with too many exclamation points, and then got embarrassed and pretended he didn't. I stood there long enough for the cold to find my bones and felt something cinch, like my chest finally had room for winter air. Work is how you love people you can't fix. That line from Maeve's Polaroid kept looping. We were loving as hard as we knew how. Cormac came through on the thing that matters. He rerouted 40% of Hale Wharf's profits into a trust that feeds the apprenticeship first and him later. And he didn't put his name on it like a tattoo. The board we built, real people, not yes men, votes the budget. And my signature can stop a vendor I don't trust. A union steward, Ms. Howard from City Colleges, a church lady in a Cubs jacket, Priya with the eyes that catch math crimes in the wild, and Cormac as 1 vote with no chair. He brought a clean line of credit to bridge payroll while the bank unfroze us, and he signed the donor list with anonymous, because he finally understood that sometimes credit is the enemy of trust. This isn't charity, I told the cohort the day the funds hit. It's a paycheck you earned by showing up and not quitting when your thumbs hurt. They laughed like they'd never been told they were allowed to keep what they earned. My brother, this is the part that still gets me, stopped looking around at red lights. He got the letter. Cleared, not sealed. The kind of clean you can hand to an employer without dying inside. He showed up to class one night with a box of cheap pizzas and tried to play it off like he was just hungry. Isaiah recognized him from the photo in my wallet and said, "You're the reason she's here." And my brother got quiet, in that way men do, when talking means crying. He pulled me aside and said, "I don't know how to live not waiting." And I said, "We'll learn. Start with breaks and bedtime." We drove to Portillo's after and ordered hot dogs wrong, just to make the cashier laugh. And for a 20-minute stretch on Harlem, we were just 2 South Side kids in a car that didn't feel like a courtroom. There were petty victories, too. The sweet kind you don't tweet because it's more fun to remember privately. The inspector, who once called me passionate, said it like an insult, asked me for my SOPs and called them clean. Big Leo, who called me sweetheart the first week, stopped himself mid-word and said, "Boss," like it tasted better. Ms. Howard brought in a guy from DevOps to help the cohort build a scrappy load. Tracking dashboard that made Manny whistle low and say, "Look at that. Kids who code and tie knots." The church basement got new paint. Maeve ran a bake sale that made more money than any grant we applied for. Tiny's shirts, paychecks, pity, started showing up at other yards. Boring spread like a good rumor. Cormac and I found a weird, honest rhythm. He would drift by the classroom some afternoons and stand in the back with his hands in his pockets like he was just there for the radiator heat. I kept my lines in the sand, and he kept respecting them. He'd try to hand me credit, and I'd hand it back, spread across 10 names. He didn't shrink. He grew into that. One night we closed the office late, the lake doing that winter shine thing through the window, and I caught him near the safe, turning something small over between his fingers. It was a ring. Plain gold. Scuffed. Like a promise someone carried through a decade of wrong rooms. He He slipped it back in his pocket when he realized I'd seen, and for once he looked not nervous, considerate. "Not a leash," he said. "A key, if you ever want one." I told him I wasn't there yet. He nodded like a man who understands scaffolding. You don't climb until it's secure. "Then we keep building," he said. "Together if we can." Next to each other if we have to. It didn't sound like possession. It sounded like weather we were willing to stand in. The city did what it always does. It moved on. Someone else's scandal took our place. The blogs found a new chew toy, and we got to work without an audience. That's the dream, really. Not revenge with fireworks, revenge with schedules. The cohort graduated on a gray morning that smelled like coffee and WD-40. No caps, no gowns. Just a handshake, a cert card, and a first day on the clock. The alderman tried to slide in for a photo, and Maeve redirected him to the coat rack with the precision of a surgeon. After the last kid left for his shift, Manny leaned against a pallet and asked, half to himself, "You think this sticks?" I thought about jackets, names you outgrow, names you finally earn. I thought about a sign on a bridge that said what needed saying. I thought about Friday paychecks and the feeling in my brother's shoulders when I hugged him and he didn't flinch. "Yeah," I said, "it sticks, not because they let us, because we stayed." Sunrise at the wharf doesn't announce itself. It just starts forgiving things. The cranes look less like threats. The river loses its mean streak, and the yard smells like coffee and wet rope. I showed up early on a Tuesday with a sack of gas station donuts and a head that finally wasn't rehearsing arguments. Payroll had hit. The cohort was on shift rotation. The bridge sign we bolted up was already gathering handprints from kids who lean when they read. Work was moving like it should. Maeve handed me a key ring the size of a bracelet. Church basement keys, storage cage, lock on the training rig, and said, "You're about to get one more. Say thank you without making a speech." She pointed with her chin. Cormac was waiting by the west office, the one that faces the lake if you stand on your toes. He had a small envelope, like he was scared of spooking it. No entourage, no speech pattern men adopt when they want something from you. Just, "Morning," and a nod at the gulls like they were co-workers we had to tolerate. He opened his palm. On it, 2 brass keys on a split ring, a fob with a chip, and a folded paper. "Office upstairs," he said. 3 windows, a radiator that only hisses on Tuesdays, a door that locks from the inside. Budget line is independent. Board votes it, not me. You set the hours. If you want to lose the door, lose it. If you want to turn it into a community dispatch for the cohort, do it. It's yours." He waited. I waited. The rain from last week was a rumor now. The air had that clean, cold taste Chicago gets when the city decides not to be petty for 5 minutes. "Keys," he added, almost a smile. "Not chains." I took them, because pretending I didn't want them would have been a lie, and I'm done lying about the good things. "Ground rules," I said, and watched his jaw unclench, because he's better with rules than with thanks. No name on the door, no corporate tour, no press calls from your phone on my time. If I say no, you back up. If I say yes, you don't make it yours in a month. He held up a hand like a ref. "Done. All of it." He started to go, then turned back like a man who remembered he left the stove on. "And when, if, you want to call a place ours, I'll be in the same city, not in your shadow." He didn't pull the ring from his pocket. He didn't make me hold something heavy before I was ready. He walked away and let me look at the lake through 3 slightly dirty windows that felt more honest than any view I'd ever had. On the new desk, scuffed, perfect, sat a padded envelope with no return address. Just my first name in a handwriting that couldn't decide if it was careful or fast. Inside, a busted prepaid flip phone, the kind you buy with cash and guilt. It buzzed when I pressed the side. One unread text. "You won't need me anymore." No signature, no flourish. The message history stared up like a note from my own spine, every nudge I'd gotten since the day my badge hit the floor. I scrolled back to City Hall and saw a photo in the sent folder. A crowd shot from the aisle, brim of a socks cap pulled low, corner of a mouth I recognized from a warehouse in the rain. He'd been there in the back. Not the devil. Not a saint. Just a man trying to pay a debt with the only currency he trusted. Tucked behind the phone was a receipt for a Greyhound to somewhere that starts flat and ends warm. On the blank side, one line in block letters, walked away. I set the phone under the radiator and felt something unclench I didn't know I was still holding. We put a small placard on the office door that afternoon because Maeve said, "Doors need names the way babies do." South Dock. Promise. Black vinyl. No logo. Isaiah came up after shift and tapped the glass with the back of his fingernail like he had to make sure it was real. "Feels like a real thing," he said. "It is," I said, "because we made it boring enough to last." We stood there a minute, listening to the low hum of reefer units and WBEZ bleeding out of somebody's truck, and he asked if it ever gets easy. "No," I said, and he looked spooked until I added, "It gets familiar. That's better." That night, I locked the office for the first time and waited on the landing with the keys warm in my palm. Cormac was by the gate, talking to Tiny about a seal that wouldn't behave. He saw me, saw the keys, and didn't ask for a verdict. He just lifted his chin like, "We good?" And I lifted mine back like, "We are." "You hungry?" he asked. "Always," I said. We walked toward the diner that burns bacon at all hours. Halfway there I stopped, pressed the keys into my pocket, and said it out loud so it would stick. "We don't erase the past," I told him, "but also myself and the river and anyone within earshot who needed the reminder. We live right next to it and build something it can't breathe in." He nodded, hands deep in his coat, not touching me, not making a scene. "We build," he said. I smiled, because the words fit better when he didn't try to make them pretty. "Then we rest," I said back. The city rolled on, sirens, laughter, someone arguing about parking like it was theology. My brother called to say he was off early and could swing by for pie. Maeve texted a photo of an empty stew pot with the caption, "This is what win looks like." The lake leaned quiet. I put my hand on the door of the diner and let myself feel the simple thing. Not victory. Not revenge. Room. Room to breathe. Room to stand. Room to hand a kid a paycheck without a speech. Keys in my pocket. Not a leash around my neck. And for the first time since the badge hit the floor, I believe the most radical thing a South Side girl can believe, that staying is a kind of freedom too.